The other day, I think we used a little bit of this stuff in one of the videos on camera. And I talked about this stuff for thicker, fatter stuff if you want it thicker. Because that one kind of self-levels. It's really liquidy like a finishing putty. This one's not. So let me show you. It's gold. You put your blue hardener in it. And this is what happens. It essentially turns, well, green because I use blue hardener. It'll turn kind of a orangey gold color if you use the red hardener. But at any rate, whoever had done the rockers, and I don't believe those are factory welds that you see dripping. Maybe they are. They look like the proper rocker. But at any rate, there was a joint here, and it was very uneven. There was a ding here. Now I know these lowers, somebody's replaced those. Just, you can tell these welds are pretty good, but some of the welds on the other side you can really tell. We have a parts car for this car, and I believe this joint is backwards, so they probably put it right on top. And honestly, that don't matter. And there's a possibility, I believe on the other car, you can see where the door is, where my finger is. I believe the joint was back here. So they cut out the rot, and they must have put a new bottom. Anyway, at any rate, you can see where it's dark. Excuse me. A lot of dust in here. I got the door open. It's a nice day out there today. But every so often the breeze picks up, and well, it's that time of the year. We're probably going to get all kinds of pollen and stuff. Anyway, back to it. You can see here where it's light, where it was sand in here. We're not quite there. Now, I'm not going to make a video because I'm literally, down on the floor. I'm lying on a cart. But I just thought I'd show you. It was uneven here. We had a ding up over here. We had done some work back there, and we did feather that out, and it was nice. But there was some chips and some little stuff. We're almost done this car, so the end of the car is right there. And what you see here, car's sanded, good to go. She's going into primer, and then it might need a little body work, but not much after that. Well, this rocker bothered me because the other side was so smooth, and it felt lumpy. And I just worried that if you're parked out on a nice paved area, and you can look down the side of the car, and I know the rocker is, it's got a heavy tip in, so no one would probably see it, but I'm going to know it's the only non-flat part of the car. So we went over it real rough, cut it up. We put a nice fat layer right across, and I even went over the work I did. And the reason why, we're going to hit it with this guy with 80. There's the 11 inch. We're going to hit it with that, and I believe we got 180 on that. And that's the papers I was using on my last job. They were in really good shape, so they'll be just fine for this little bit we're doing. And what I did is I stopped so I could show you. But I mean, we're real close. It's not dipping in there. I put it real fat here. So I brought it this way. And then what happens is if you go across it to here, that's your low spot. So then what I decided to do is bring it across here, and I realized it's high here. I'm pretty sure this is going to be pretty flat, but right here we got a little too much filler, but this is where it was weird, so we kind of knocked it in a bit and we filled it. So I'm going to keep taking this down until it gets real close to here and here, and I'm going to go back and forth a little bit, and then we'll finish this out. That's really, really thin, so that'll finish out super quick. And then we'll do our 180, sorry, 40, then we'll do our 80. It's 40 and 80. We'll take our 80 across it and make it decent. And then after that's done, we'll do a 180 and a 220 real quick, and that'll be ready for primer. Actually, it's the rocker. We're going to do the rockers probably with a thicker primer, so we'll probably leave them in 180. So let's talk about the product. That's the stuff right there. These are the two fillers I use primarily. And then I use a little bit of the short strand kitty hair, your short strand fiber filled or fiberglass Bondo body filler, I should say. But these two products are really nice. And like I say, this one's liquidy and thin. It works like a finishing putty. This one's a little thicker. It's got more body to it, and it'll stay in place. Like if I tried to put, if I do a big area like I just showed you with this stuff, it might be okay, but it may not want to thicken, and it'll follow those bumps because it really likes to flatten out. So now if I do this and there's little marks and stuff that I don't like and I got to do it a second time, I'll use this right over top of it. And like I say, that stuff is super smooth and liquidy. This stuff's a little thicker. This is like Rage. It might be a little bit thicker than Rage, but the best way I can describe it is it's pretty much Rage at half the price. The price of these two together is the same price as 1 can of Rage for me to buy through my supplier. So depending on what deal you get, it's pretty good stuff and the price is right. And honestly, it's some of the best stuff I've used. But full disclosure, this hardener right here, it's like a pinky red. It's not like the hardeners you pick up with other stuff. And then this one here is blue and it's just fine. This hardener in this product, if you put it on a little on the fat side, if you're doing collision work, the downside to this is it does, how would I say, it's got a slow work time, or I should say cure time. The work time is a little longer than some of the others, but it gives you a little bit of time to work with it if you don't use too much hardener. So it does harden, but it takes longer than some of the other products. Like if you get the light white Evercoat, and maybe even the Rage for that matter, they dry faster. This one's not as bad, but I did notice right off the bat when I changed, I had to kind of get used to how I used my hardener. But in a collision application, they do run a little slower. Toss those and just buy yourself a couple tubes of regular hardener. But in this application, where we, flood panels and whatnot, you haven't seen my videos, go check them out for sure. But if you're going to flood a whole quarter the way I'd flooded that whole quarter and block it out, that stuff gives you nice work time, and it goes slow enough that even by the time I did the whole fender, I could go across it with the cheese grater and have plenty of time before it went rock hard on me. So it gives you that time. And then by the time I did that and got into the board files, the airline sanders, it was ready to take that. So even when it's a little soft yet, you can almost sand it with the line sanders. And there's a point where it's still soft, but it doesn't quite plug up the paper. And then once you start sanding it, of course, it turns hard as a rock like everything else. It just gives you a little more work time. Is basically what I'm trying to say. We had a couple flaws I didn't like that I didn't want to bury in primer. There was one there. There was a little ding there, which I believe was probably, as the fender gets flat, there's a trim that goes here, but I think someone put their elbow on there, probably, the owner when he restored all this, which is fine. That won't hurt anything. So we went ahead, we touched those up, and there was a couple other spots on the car. But I just wasn't happy when I went to sand that rocker. It felt wavy. I don't think it was wavy enough that anyone would notice. But I know it's there and it's going to bug me. So we got to fill it out. And I went to the yellow because I put it on a little thicker. And again, like I said, it was just so that we could get away with making it straight with the 40. It sounds really coarse, but all we're doing is cutting it flat. And I didn't sand it right into the body there. It just kind of floated the top of it, so it's not super smooth. When we do our 80, we'll get it a little closer. Then we'll do like a 180. So at that point, you'll still have lots of, all the filler ends up on the floor. All we want to do is take the little bit. And when I say ripple, it was a little bit. But it is what it is. So that's what we're at today. I grabbed a block and went down this just so I could see by hand what was high and low and all that. And that's what I'm kind of doing, just chasing everything. Doesn't matter if we have stuff showing through or a little bare metal or filler. We got some up there showing, doesn't matter. And the reason why, once we're done this and these little spots here and there, it's going into the booth. We're going to tape it all up, and probably tomorrow maybe tonight, but I doubt it. By the time I tape everything off, the bottom of the car is all restored. We don't want to put a pile of overspray. So the way we're going to attack this, and I mentioned some of it in my other videos, the bottom edge of the rocker, we're going to hit that with 2 coats of epoxy primer. And the reason why is we want something real tough down on the bottom edge of the rocker. We're also going to do around the wheel wells, because you know what happens there with the stones and the whatnot. That's where cars start to go first. And I mean, this won't be daily driven, so it's probably not an issue. I will catch the bottom edge of the fender where it all joins together, again, just with the epoxy primer. We're going to go from there. We're going to go around the windows and around the door openings. And then at the front, we're probably going to do inside where the headlight bezels and stuff are. Just on this car, I think it would be good protection to have in there. So that's what we're going to do with the epoxy primer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a sandable, probably 3 real fat coats. And I think I'm going to go ahead. This fender is really, really good, but a little bit at the back might need some attention. So we might go with a high build. And this side might get a coat, 2 coats, and then we'll flow coat, 1 coat the rest. It's all going to end up on the floor. But the fender over here that got all the trauma, we're basically going to put 3 full coats on that quarter panel, the high build. So the rest of the car, we're going to go with the urethane, and it's a high build primer surfacer, but it's not the same kind of high build. It basically hides sand scratches and swirls. So all that stuff is smooth enough that we'll do a couple coats of that. We can do 2 or 3 full wet coats. So we'll shoot on our 1 coat, we'll look at it. And what'll happen is it's a urethane dark gray primer. And then when you sand it, it goes light gray and it'll blend into the rest. But the nice thing is we'll be able to see any little pits, marks, swirls, anything that won't show after the first coat. We'll take our light, we'll go look at it before it completely flashes off. And then we'll go back and then we'll know if we can get away with a 2nd coat or if we're going to need a 3rd. And basically everything on the car will be sandable. So the fenders will be pretty much perfect. So they'll be real easy to sand. It's just a matter of taking the orange peel off and making it smooth. And the nice thing with that primer is you don't even have to seal it or do any of that nonsense because it seals itself. So does the epoxy primer. However, if we use the epoxy, the high build that I use, then we'll be okay with our quarters as well. But we may do just the rear quarters with the G2 feather fill. I'm tempted to try it out, and I think this might be a good opportunity to do so because I know it goes on super fat. It'll fix a lot of damage. You got to remember, if you take a tape measure from there and you stop right at that body line, you've got a 9-foot quarter panel. And it's right on the money if you go right down where that trim piece goes. And it's quite strange. You've got a perfect 9 feet. The door is like a perfect 4 feet. And then the front fender is a perfect 5 feet. So yeah, it's a lot of car. 18 feet of car. Once you do the bumpers and all the stuff and everything hanging off the back, the car is, I believe, 20.5 feet, if I'm not mistaken. It's a pretty long car. And this is a 63 2-door Coupe de Ville. And there's a model longer than this in a 2-door, which I believe is 59 or 60. So, but I thought it was pretty interesting that the door didn't just land somewhere willy-nilly. However they ordered their steel to do this, that must have, well, who knows how they designed it or whatever. But yeah, 5 feet, 4 feet, 9 feet, and there's your car. Anyway, just wanted to touch on that filler. It's a really good product. I really like it. I've used a lot of products. Price-wise, very happy. There's some cheaper stuff out there that I won't use. Now, if you can get a good deal on the Evercoat White Light and you add a little bit of honey in it, and when I say honey, you'll have to Google that stuff. It's basically a little bit of that resin, and you can buy it off Amazon. And what you do is, let's say you're a little bit thick, you just add a little bit of resin into it down here, the same way you would add resin into your fiberglass filler, except it's made specifically for fillers. I used to do that with the white light, basically turning something that was sort of like this more into that, and it would smooth it out and be nice. Another trick that people have done, and I saw a couple videos, this is your metal glaze from Evercoat. Now if you take your white light and let's say you throw a dollop on about that size, you can throw maybe twice that size worth of that stuff. So about whatever that is, do about a quarter of that, mix it in it. That'll also flow it right out, and it'll flow and be thin instead of having only that much, because you know this stuff is super expensive. Now you can see by the dirt on here, I haven't used that in a while, and the reason why, I use that, and then I use that, and I literally use that as that. That's how much I like that product. Thanks for watching. Cheers.